I knew something was wrong before I even got out of the truck. That's the part that still sticks with me. Not because I saw anything right away, but because I felt it. The light looked different. The yard felt exposed somehow, like somebody had pulled the walls off a house and expected nobody to notice. Then I stepped out, looked toward the back of the property, and my stomach dropped. My fence was gone. Not damaged. Not knocked over by a storm. Gone. About 200 feet of 6-foot privacy fence that had surrounded my property for nearly a decade had vanished while I was away for 4 days. Now, if you've never spent years building a life from scratch, that might not sound like much. To some people, a fence is just wood and nails. But to me, that fence meant something. It was the first thing I built after moving out to western Tennessee, about 40 minutes outside a little town called Ashford Ridge. 3 acres of land, surrounded by old oak trees, far enough from civilization that at night all you could hear was crickets and wind moving through the branches. I didn't move there because I loved isolation. I moved there because I needed peace. The years before that hadn't exactly been kind to me. Divorce, layoffs, too many nights staring at apartment ceilings wondering how everything had gone sideways. When I finally scraped together enough money to buy that property, it felt less like a purchase and more like a second chance. The fence came 2 years later. I built most of it myself. Every Saturday, every Sunday, digging post holes in Tennessee clay that felt like concrete, mixing bags of cement in a wheelbarrow, measuring twice, cutting once. The kind of work that leaves your back screaming, but somehow quiets everything happening in your head. Back then I had 2 rescue dogs, Cooper and Sadie. Both sweet animals. Both complete idiots when it came to boundaries. Without a fence, they'd chase squirrels halfway to Kentucky if given the opportunity. So I built the fence. For them. For me. For the simple comfort of knowing where my world ended and the rest of the world began. For years, nobody cared. The older couple next door barely spoke beyond a friendly wave. We'd exchange Christmas cards, complain about deer eating our gardens, and leave each other alone. It was perfect. Then they sold the house. And that's when everything changed. The new neighbors arrived in late spring. Travis and Brooke Holloway. The kind of people who seemed determined to transform everything they touched. Contractors showed up before they even finished unpacking. Landscaping crews tore out half the yard. A designer truck appeared every other day. Within a month, the place looked completely different. The first real conversation I had with Travis happened on a Tuesday morning. I was checking the mailbox when I noticed him standing beside my fence. Not near it, beside it, staring at it, hands on his hips, like an art critic evaluating a painting he didn't like. I remember slowing down and thinking, that's strange. When he noticed me, he smiled. Not a friendly smile. One of those polished corporate smiles that never quite reaches the eyes. "Morning, Ethan," he called. "Morning." He nodded toward the fence. "You ever think about opening this up?" I frowned. "Opening what up?" He swept his arm toward both properties. "This whole area. You've got beautiful land over here. We've got beautiful land over there. Feels kind of silly having this giant barrier separating everything." I actually laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. Brooke joined him a moment later, carrying coffee. "We were talking about maybe creating a more connected atmosphere," she said. "Something more community-oriented. Community-oriented. Out here, on private acreage." I looked from one of them to the other, then back at my fence, then back at them, and finally said the only thing that made sense. "I like my fence." The smile on Travis's face tightened. "Sure, I get that. Just seems a little closed off." "It is closed off," I said. "That's kind of the point." For a second, nobody said anything. Then Travis gave a little nod. The kind people give when they're pretending to accept an answer. "Well," he said quietly, "we'll see." I should have paid more attention to those 2 words. Because after that conversation, strange little things started happening. Nothing dramatic. Nothing you could point to. Just enough to make you uncomfortable. Their kids kept playing closer and closer to the property line. A ladder showed up leaning against their side of the fence one afternoon. Brooke started taking long walks along the boundary, staring at survey markers like she was studying them. Every time I noticed one of those things, I'd tell myself I was imagining it. Maybe they were just curious. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe. But looking back now, I think they had already decided that fence wasn't staying. I just didn't know it yet. And 4 weeks later, while I was sitting on a beach nearly 400 miles away, trying to enjoy the first vacation I'd taken in years, Travis Holloway made a decision that would cost him far more than he ever imagined. By the time I pulled into my driveway that Sunday afternoon, the sun was hanging low over the trees, and everything looked normal, at least for about 3 seconds. Then my brain finally caught up with what my eyes were seeing. Or more accurately, what they weren't seeing. The fence was gone. I just stood there beside my truck, keys still in my hand, staring across what used to be a clearly defined property line. Nothing. No privacy fence. No wooden panels. No boundary. Just open space stretching from their yard straight into mine like it had always been that way. For a moment, I honestly wondered if I was losing my mind. Then I spotted the debris. Broken panels stacked in a pile near the tree line. Several fence posts ripped completely out of the ground. Chunks of concrete scattered across the grass. And right in the middle of what used to be my enclosed yard sat a volleyball net. A bright blue volleyball net. My stomach turned. I started walking. Fast. The closer I got, the worse it looked. Some of the posts had been snapped. Others had been yanked out with machinery. The gate I'd built by hand was laying on its side like trash. 8 years. Gone. Like it meant nothing. I heard laughter coming from next door. Kids shouting. Music playing. The smell of barbecue drifting through the air. And suddenly I wasn't looking at an accident. I was looking at a celebration. I crossed the property line and headed straight toward their patio. Travis was standing beside a grill, flipping burgers. Brooke sat at a table talking with another couple. Nobody looked concerned. Nobody looked surprised, which told me everything I needed to know. When Travis finally noticed me walking up, he smiled. That same polished smile. That same look. Like he already knew exactly what I was going to say. What happened to my fence? I asked it calmly. Honestly calmer than I felt. The smile never left his face. Oh, that, he said. That. Like we were discussing lawn furniture. We took it down. For a second, I just stared at him, waiting for the punchline. Waiting for the explanation that would somehow make the sentence make sense. None came. You what? He shrugged. Our landscape architect suggested it. Our what? Our landscape architect. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was so ridiculous my brain didn't know what else to do. You hired someone to redesign my property. No, he said quickly. You're looking at it the wrong way. We improved the overall visual flow. The overall visual flow. I swear those were his exact words. Brooke jumped in. The properties feel so much bigger now. The kids love it, Travis added. I looked over at the volleyball net. Then back at him. That's my property. Technically. I blinked. Technically. He spread his hands. Property lines are kind of arbitrary when you think about it. There it was. The sentence. The moment everything changed. Some people hear something so stupid that they immediately get angry. I had the opposite reaction. I got calm. Dangerously calm. The kind of calm that comes right before a decision gets made. Put it back. I said it quietly. Travis chuckled. Actually chuckled. We already paid to remove it. I don't care. It cost us almost $2,000. I don't care. He shook his head. You should at least split the expense. I stared at him. I honestly thought I had misheard him. You want me to pay for the fence you destroyed? We improved both properties. The couple sitting at the table suddenly became very interested in their drinks. Nobody wanted to make eye contact anymore. Good. At least somebody there still understood reality. I looked around one last time. At the broken posts. At the net. At my missing fence. Then I turned around and walked away. Travis called after me. Once you get used to it, you like it. I never responded. Because there are moments in life where arguing becomes a waste of oxygen. That was one of them. Instead, I spent the next 2 hours taking photographs. Every panel, every post, every tire track, every inch of damage. Then I made a phone call. Not to the sheriff. Not yet. I called Rebecca Hayes. Now Rebecca wasn't just an attorney. She was the kind of attorney you wanted in your corner when somebody decided common sense no longer applied to them. I'd worked with her once before on a property issue involving an easement dispute. Sharp woman. No nonsense. The kind of person who could dismantle a bad argument before the other side finished making it. She answered on the second ring. Ethan, what's going on? I sent her the photos while we talked. The silence on the other end grew longer with each image. Finally, she said something. Tell me they didn't actually do this. They did. Another pause. Then she laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. What reason did they give? I looked toward their property. The volleyball game was still going. Apparently, their landscape architect wanted better visual flow. Rebecca burst out laughing. A full laugh this time. Oh, judges love visual flow. The next morning, she got to work. Demand letter. Property damage claims. Trespass violations. Destruction of private improvements. Everything documented. Everything formal. The letter was simple. Restore the fence exactly as it existed. Pay all damages. Respond immediately. No negociations. No compromises. No discussions about community atmosphere. Just fix what you broke. 3 days later, we got a response. Not from Travis. Not from Brooke. Not even from a local attorney. A law firm in Chicago. Big letterhead. Big language. Big confidence. Their argument was incredible. According to them, the fence had become aesthetically outdated. Its removal had improved neighborhood appearance. Their clients had acted in good faith. Good faith. By tearing down someone else's property. And because they were such reasonable people, they were willing to offer a solution. A decorative hedge. 3 feet tall. Shared expense. I read the letter 3 times. Then I called Rebecca. She answered before the second ring. Please tell me you saw this. I did. What now? I could hear papers moving on her desk. Then her voice changed. More focused. More serious. The same thing that always happens when people mistake confidence for ownership. What does that mean? It means we're filing. The paperwork moved quickly after that. Faster than I expected. Property surveys. Construction permits. Historical photos. Witness statements. Everything Rebecca could possibly need. Within a week, we had a hearing scheduled. And for the first time since I gotten home from vacation, I felt something close to relief. Because no matter how absurd Travis's logic was, eventually somebody with actual authority was going to hear it. And I had a feeling that was going to be a very interesting day. The only thing I didn't realize yet was that winning the first battle wasn't going to end the war. In fact, it was about to make everything a whole lot more expensive for my neighbors. The hearing itself wasn't dramatic in the way television likes to pretend courtrooms are dramatic. Nobody slammed fists on tables. Nobody shouted objections every 30 seconds. Mostly it was paperwork, timelines, photographs, and a judge trying to determine whether common sense was still alive and well in Western Tennessee. Judge Raymond Walker looked exactly like the kind of man you'd expect to see presiding over rural property disputes. Gray hair, reading glasses, patient expression, the kind of face that suggested he'd heard every excuse imaginable. Rebecca presented our evidence first. Survey maps, permit records, photographs of the original fence, photographs of the destruction, photos showing the volleyball net sitting where my fence had stood. The judge spent a long time looking at those. Then it was Travis's attorney's turn. To his credit, the man tried. He really did. He talked about neighborhood harmony, shared visual experiences, open landscapes, community enhancement. At one point, he actually used the phrase mutual environmental enjoyment. I remember glancing toward Rebecca. She wasn't looking at him. She was staring at the ceiling, probably because looking directly at him might have caused permanent eye damage. Eventually, Judge Walker held up a hand. The courtroom went quiet. The fence belonged to the plaintiff. Yes, Your Honor. It was located entirely on his property. Yes, Your Honor. It was removed without permission. A pause. The attorney shifted uncomfortably. Technically, yes. The judge nodded once. Then he looked down at the paperwork. When he spoke again, his voice was calm, almost boring, which somehow made it hit harder. The defendants are ordered to restore the fence to its original function and boundary purpose within 14 days at their own expense. That was it. Game over. At least that's what I thought. Outside the courthouse, Travis never looked at me. Not once. He stood talking to his attorney while Brooke stared at the parking lot. For the first time since I'd met them, neither one seemed particularly confident. And honestly, I figured that was the end of it. A court order is a court order. Normal people comply. Apparently, Travis Holloway had other ideas. 14 days passed. Nothing happened. No construcción cruz. No materials. No fence. Day 15 arrived. Still nothing. The volleyball net remained exactly where it had been. Their kids still ran across the same section of property. Every morning I'd look out the window and see the empty space where my fence used to stand. And every morning it annoyed me a little more. Finally, I called Rebecca. They didn't do it. I know. The fact that she sounded completely unsurprised somehow made it worse. What now? Now we enforce. That's a powerful word. Enforce. Up until then, everything had involved requests, letters, hearings, deadlines. Now we were entering a different phase. Rebecca explained our options. Contempt proceedings, cost recovery, court enforcement. Then she said something that stuck with me. If you rebuild the barrier yourself, document everything, and stay completely within the court's order, they're going to end up paying for it anyway. I walked to the kitchen window, looked outside, stared at the open property line, and suddenly an idea hit me. A very expensive idea. I don't want the old fence. Rebecca was quiet for a second. What are you thinking? I smiled. The strongest legal fence money can buy. The survey crew arrived 2 days later. Then contractors. Then engineers. Then delivery trucks. A lot of delivery trucks. Word travels fast in small communities. By the time construction started, half the county seemed aware of what was happening. I was standing near the property line, drinking coffee when the first steel panels arrived. Massive things. Dark gray. Industrial grade. Not decorative. Not charming. Not neighborly. Just strong. Very, very strong. The first truck hadn't even finished unloading before Travis came storming across his yard. What is all this? I set my coffee down. This is my new fence. His eyes widened. No, it isn't. Oh, it definitely is. He pointed toward the steel. That's ridiculous. Rebecca happened to be there that morning. Perfect timing. She stepped forward. Mr. Holloway, your clients failed to comply with a lawful court order. My client is proceeding with reconstruction and cost mitigation. Travis stared at her, then at me, then back at the steel. This isn't reconstruction. It separates the properties. It looks like a fortress. I shrugged. Then maybe don't tear down people's fences. His face turned red. The crews kept working. Nobody stopped. Nobody even slowed down. And that might have been the most satisfying part. Watching him realize his opinion no longer mattered. The holes were deeper than the original fence. The support posts were reinforced steel. Concrete anchors disappeared several feet underground. Panel after panel went up. By lunchtime, the shape was obvious. By late afternoon, it was impossible to ignore. 8 feet tall, solid steel, no gaps, no civility, no volleyball games, no discussions about visual flow, no misunderstandings about property lines, just a very clear boundary. Brooke finally came outside around sunset. She crossed her arms and stared at the wall. This is hostile. I looked at her, then looked at the empty spot where my original fence used to be. So it was demolition. She didn't have much to say after that. A week later, Rebecca filed for reimbursement. Every invoice, every labor charge, every permit, every truck, every bolt. The total wasn't small, not even close. That's when Travis made one final mistake. He filed a counterclaim. According to him, the new structure damaged the appearance of his property, reduced enjoyment, affected value, created what his filing called an oppressive visual condition. The amount he wanted? $75,000. When Rebecca told me, I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. The second hearing lasted less than 20 minutes. Judge Walker reviewed the documents, looked through the photographs, read the original order. Then he looked directly at Travis. The defendants were given an opportunity to comply. Silence. They declined. More silence. The plaintiff acted within his legal rights. Then came the part one still remember word for word. The court will not reward individuals for problems they created themselves. Counterclaim dismissed. Reconstruction costs awarded. Case closed. Outside the courthouse, Travis finally looked at me. Really looked at me. Not with confidence. Not with arrogance. Just frustration. This didn't have to happen. I thought about that for a second. About the first conversation beside my fence. About the ladder. About the volleyball net. About every opportunity he'd had to stop. Then I nodded. You're right. His expression changed slightly, like maybe he thought I was agreeing with him. I wasn't. It didn't. Then I walked away. These days the property is quiet again. The dogs still run around the yard. The trees still sway in the wind. The sunsets still hit the fields the same way they always did. And every now and then I'll look out toward that steel barrier and remember how all of it started. Not because of a fence. Not really. It started because somebody convinced himself that another person's boundaries were negotiable. Maybe that's the real lesson. Some people think rules only apply when they're convenient. Some people think confidence is the same thing as permission. And sometimes they get away with it, until one day they don't. Now I'm curious what you think. Did I go too far with the steel wall? Should I have rebuilt the same wooden fence and moved on? Or once someone destroys your property and ignores a court order, do they lose the right to complain about what comes next? Let me know down in the comments. And if you've ever dealt with a neighbor who thought your property was somehow open to interpretation, I'd love to hear your story too.